Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Now, in today's show, we're going to talk about weapon insurance. Now, I'm using footage from a survival game, Scum in this case, to kind of illustrate kind of one of the ideals that we hope is going to be ever present in Star Citizen, which is the idea that combat, personal inventory, things like this, that they matter, that they're significant, and that they're an important feature in the game. And far too often, you know, when you see a lot of these FPS games, what happens? You die, you respawn, and you have everything that you started off with. And that's not something that we want Star Citizen to necessarily be. However, you know, with ships, we somewhat have that right now. If you go out and you upgrade engines, guns, things like that, if your ship gets destroyed or if you get disconnected from the game, you get these things back. You get these things back as part of your ship. It's automatic now. It's just, I guess, factored into the cost of your insurance, though I would not be surprised in the future if you see some adjustment or some added kind of like deductible that you have to pay to get everything back and not just your ship hull if you have LTI, and as long as, or if you don't, as long as the current insurance on your ship isn't expired. However, when it comes to FPS weapons, that kind of protection doesn't exist in Star Citizen right now. And I'm somewhat conflicted on this issue. On the one point, I feel that it should. That we should be able to keep these weapons for a time. In the same way that in the current version of Star Citizen, you get your ship items restored to you. I feel that your FPS weapons should be restored to you as well, because, you know, in the past we got this system with ships because people were, you know, reluctant to upgrade their ships because they were sitting there going, what's the point? I get 30K out of the game. I lose everything. I spent potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands or possibly millions of credits on, only to have it all just be erased and to basically have to start from ground zero. So a lot of people were just like, I'm just going to take a stock ship out because, you know, what's the point? I'm just going to lose it. And eventually, we all know that eventually you're just going to get disconnected from the game. So it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you're going to lose all these items. So a lot of players were not, you know, all that enthused about going out and buying these things, because sometimes even just not your fault, these things would just, you would just lose them. At the same time, you know, like a traditional survival game, we want inventory to matter. We want combat to be something that has a certain cost or a certain inconvenience attached to it if you fail, so it gives people that moment of pause, that moment to stop and think and go, do I really want to do this? Do I want to risk it? Because I feel that, you know, there's a certain value to that. It's certainly, it curbs griefing to a certain extent, but it also makes players a lot more thoughtful about their actions in game, which generally I feel produces a better gameplay experience overall. I mean, for people who don't want that, there are things like PUBG, there are things like Battlefield, and they're fine. But for people who want a bit more thoughtful combat, which I think that generally the Star Citizen audience is after, something like this could be a good feature to kind of implement in the game, some kind of item insurance for the time being. Now, in the survival genre, of course, one of the cool things, one of the more interesting things about the game, one of the more rewarding parts of the game, is the management of personal inventory. And I don't just mean like what you carry on your person and making sure you don't weigh too much, or, you know, that you're carrying enough food or water or anything like that. Those are all important features, and those are all features that Star Citizen is going to have. But I think that we have to kind of, when we look at basic gameplay, even something like raiding a bunker, you know, recently CIG showed us some footage of improvement to AI where if they run out of ammunition, they would go back to an ammo crate and load themselves up. But I think that in addition to that, as we move into a state in the game where the game itself is more stable, and personal inventory is not just what you carry on you, but what you own as a person in the Star Citizen universe, should now, be much more permanent. And we should kind of get to a point where if you're out there and you're, raiding said bunker, and, NPCs have their ammo crates or their stash of ammunition at that location, we should be in a position that if we defeat them, it should be important to us to scavenge up all their weapons. It should be important to us to maybe even take that ammo crate, whatever it contains, whatever finite amount of ammo and whatever type of ammo it contains. It should be a good idea to maybe even take the ammo crate as well and haul that away. I think that in the future, once the game gets more stable, it should be up to us to kind of look for opportunities like that to expand our personal inventory and our reservoir of weapons. I'm okay with the cost of weapons in the Star Citizen universe. I'm okay with the idea that maybe we have to maintain our weapons and, keep our guns clean or whatnot, or maintain them if they become, overused or whatnot. Things like that I'm totally okay with. But I would like to see us get to a point in the future where we look for opportunities like that to acquire new weapons, and not just buy them at stores, but to acquire them during missions, like bunker missions or things of that nature. That's what I would like to see in the future. But for the time being, to encourage people to go out there and purchase weapons and experiment with them, and not just constantly just spend money on them and then just to kind of see any bug in the game erase that effort. I think that we should have some form of deductible that we are willing to pay for our life insurance or whatnot in the game, to have that equipment restored to us in its entirety should we perish in the game, whether by error or simply by doing something dumb. When we look at ships and we think about, I want to buy these guns or these shields, or I got to make sure I got enough fuel, or I got to make sure that my components are in a good state so that they're not misfiring or anything like that. I think that one of the other things that we should look at is, I want to make sure that my weapon racks are full and that I've got ammo and armor and all these things for anyone who jumps on my ship. If we're going to go do something, I want to make sure that I have all the tools there, so there's no we can do this, but first we got to go stop over here because so-and-so has to buy a gun or a certain kind of sight or whatnot, instead being able to say, just go down to the armory. Well, not if you're flying in a Hammerhead, because, that's military ships don't carry guns. Everyone knows that. But with other ships that you should be capable, or you should be encouraged to kind of keep those things full. And so even where little opportunities arrive in the game where you can search areas that you're breaking into, whether it be a bunker like that, and retrieve things like ammunition and stuff for later use, would be encouraged. I think that would overall, I think that would make for a richer game experience. But for right now, the state that the game is in, I don't think that it does a lot to encourage the use of FPS weapons. Now, I know that we're getting things like Theaters of War in the future, which is going to allow us to experiment with FPS gameplay in a much more stable environment. And certainly what we have in Star Marine, it's Call of Duty-esque, but I think that overall in Star Citizen itself, until we get to that stable point, we should look at something like gun insurance to kind of bridge the gap until we get there. That's where I would like to see the game get to in the future. I want weapons to be important. I want there to be a consequence to losing them, but at the same time, I feel that the consequences currently are a little too brutal for the state that the game is in, and that maybe a good way to kind of bridge the gap between that point of stability where we can do these things is to include either in the price of the weapon, or to introduce a small fee when you res, that allows you to basically restore whatever lost weapons you had to you. Well, you know what, not so much if you're restoring to something like a Cutlass Red or a Carrack, because you know, then you would just have people endlessly respawning fully loaded for combat. But when you're respawning at a station, I think that there should be a way to kind of mitigate that pain point. I mean, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.